Welcome to the second episode, questions and answers. I've been getting some interesting questions in. The big one today is about drum endorsements. It's quite a big topic, especially for young players. Do you need them? Do you want them? Have they got any value? Is there any point in them? What do you get out of them? So we're going to come on to that. And then after that, we've got a few questions. We've got something about practicing with towels on drums, and something about triggering tracks for live and live looping, and then replacing tabla heads. That's all coming a little bit later. But we're going to kick off with the endorsement thing, because for me it's a very weird thing, because a lot of young players seem to put a lot of emphasis and over in importance on the idea of getting an endorsement. For me, in a sense, it has some uses, but it's also a little bit of a folly in terms of your overall career development. So I think it's important that you don't place too much overemphasis on this type of thing. Now, for me, I was very lucky, really, because I wasn't even aware of endorsements, and my career went certain ways. And then I was writing for Rhythm magazine back in the 90s, and then started to do some clinics and performances at the Rhythm Days that used to happen at Wembley Conference Centre and stuff like that. And then just out randomly, Bob Wixlin, who was a great guy, actually. He was probably still is, for all I know. I don't know. He was the head of Europe for Zildjian cymbals. In fact, he used to be the drummer with Adam and the Ants back in the day. So a good history of drumming in his bones there. He came up to me and said, "Do you want an endorsement with Zildjian?" And I didn't even really know what endorsements were or what the point of it was, but I was always, well, okay, and you get a load of free cymbals and yeah, amazing, yeah, why not, and then from then, although that was great, there was no real other interaction other than you've got these cymbals, use them on whatever you do, and of course this is pre-social media and everyone's videoing themselves all the time. So that was all great. And then a little while later, I don't know how it came about, but Norbert Sayman of Meinl, I was doing some articles on percussion, actually, in Rhythm magazine, and I think he came up, and then we used Meinl, and then the Meinl drums Meinl percussion was in the pictures of the thing, and they were kind of my first early endorsements. Nothing really ever happened apart from X amount of gear that you got, and your picture in the yearly artist collection of the company, pictures of drums and artists and whatever. So it was kind of flattering in a way, but I never really thought beyond that. It was what it was. I wasn't thinking that it was a great marketing opportunity, there's the part of it that you think, well, it's nice that you've been recognised and accepted into their fold. That's a good thing. And on the surface of it, you sort of think, well, obviously we're going to go a lot in depth of other elements of endorsements, but on the surface of it, you think, what's negative about that? There's not a lot. Now, actually, there can be, because you've got to think very carefully about whether you do want an endorsement, because one of the caveats to having an endorsement, especially in the days now where everything is filmed, is you have to play that gear. So if you're really emotionally attached to other gear, and that sound is very important to your personal sound, then you're going to have a problem, because you can't really play that gear on your public events, really. And so you've immediately got into a position where you might have to compromise what you're doing as an artist, with your sound, because you've chosen to have this endorsement and you have to play that gear. Now, I don't know, with drum set, maybe it's less of a problem. I'm not sure. With cymbals, more of a problem. With percussion, definitely a problem, because no one company out of the major drum companies specializes enough in obscure world percussion, for example, particularly the stuff that I played. I mean, I bet the best time for me, I think, was when Remo were doing their world percussion range, because although there were some inconsistencies in those instruments, they covered a lot of things that I played, and that I could build a meaningful set on, the Kanjira, Darabuka, frame drums, Rick, pretty obscure instruments that, apart from some of the smaller companies like Cooperman or some of the smaller frame drum companies, you can't really get. So that's the first major consideration: is, are you happy playing only that gear? I mean, obviously, in the beginning, I used to play all sorts of stuff on sessions and different settings, but now, with everyone's got cameras all the time, and it became more problematic to do that, because someone will, you'll be in the public arena playing, I don't know, say for example I wanted to play minor percussion stuff, whatever they had, and I was a Remo endorser, that can be a little bit of a problem. So that's one of the first considerations to think about. And the next thing to think about is what to expect from an endorsement and what you're realistically going to get from a company. The environment now is very different than it was 15, 20 years ago. There's a lot less money going into artist kitties. There's it's a very, very different environment. A lot of the companies are managed more, have CEOs that aren't directly musicians, like Vic Firth was a musician, very, very hands-on, really understood artists. Remo, a lot of these older generation were much more inclined to understand, I think, the artistic side of it, whereas now a lot of the companies are run a little bit, I mean, they need to be, obviously, but they're run as businesses, really specifically as businesses, with CEOs that have come in from hotel management or managing shaving companies or whatever. These people have come in, and obviously they've got their ideas, and they probably look at like artist budgets and think, well, what's that doing? Why is there all that money going on? They don't necessarily always understand the community of a lot of the things that would come out of artist programs from drum companies. So maybe it's just that things change as time goes on, and so what you're going to get out of it isn't necessarily what you fantasize that you're going to get out of it, because those days aren't really there anymore for getting big artist support. I mean, I think the classic example of great artist support was the Minors program, where they take certain drummers and they would just focus all of their marketing energy through certain players who, I mean, it obviously made their name, which was great for those drummers, but it's also a great initiative. It's pushing out players into the market, getting them on drum festivals, getting them clinic tours and stuff like that. And so you might think, oh yeah, I'm going to be with Remo or Meinl or Zildjian or whoever, and I'm going to do clinic tours and I'm going to do all the major drum festivals and stuff like that. And it doesn't actually always transpire into that type of thing. I mean, obviously you've got to work for it and push forward for that. But even then, there are many absolutely amazing technical players, great players with positive attitudes who are with particular companies who don't get those opportunities. So it's something worth thinking about. If that's your sole objective, then it's not necessarily going to come as easily as getting an endorsement, and getting an endorsement isn't easy. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, so there's that. But of course, you might not want to be a soloist. You might not want to be doing drum clinics or working on the industry side of things. You know, if you're a band player, for example, you know, you're playing with a band and you're touring, then, you know, you might want gear support around the world and different things like that. Now, if you're with a really big band, you're more likely to get signed for an endorsement. But then if you're with a really big band, you know, you probably don't really need it either, because, you know, the big band that you're with is going to be dealing with all the backline and all the gear and either traveling with it or hiring it or doing whatever. So, you know, it's more a player that's doing smaller events that is going to need that type of support. And then because, you know, it's a smaller player, you know, or less exposed, shall we say, they're less inclined to get that support worldwide. I mean, to get gear support worldwide is, you know, is quite a big thing. I mean, obviously there's different levels of endorsements, and it's important to understand that at the beginning. So you would go in and maybe you'd get like the level 1 endorsement, which would be, you know, trade price gear, and then it would go up from there to, you know, maybe gear at a, you know, 1/10 of the price or something, and then free gear, and then. So yeah, lots of different levels of endorsements. So, you know, you kind of got to clearly understand that when you're going into it. And then, how would you get an endorsement? You know, what do you do? It's like I mean, it reminds me a little bit of people trying to get a record deal back in the day. And I think they kind of fantasize that, you know, if you get a record deal, like all of your problems are solved. That's it. You know, there's no problems anymore. You got this almost like this new mum and dad that are going to sort all your problems out and push you out into the world, and everything's sorted. And you know, it's actually not like that at all with companies. So you've got to be aware that whatever you do and you know, get with a company is going to come with a lot of hard work and a lot of relationship building. For me, one of the most important things in my endorsements was, and you know, I was very lucky. I had lots of endorsements, and I could change companies, and it was you know, I was very fortunate. Has to be said. But one of the important things for me was building relationships with people in the companies. You know, that involves, you know, going to trade shows, trying to, you know, get, I mean, not being like a Klingon sort of Velcro person, but, you know, just trying to, you know, be familiar with the people, know them, make sure they know your name, you know, what you're up to, have a bit of fun, a bit of a laugh. You know, I mean, certainly with the companies that I was with, I had really good relationships. I mean, particularly Remo. I mean, when I went to the Remo office, you know, I knew every single person. And that, you know, there's 30 or 40 people in that office, but I knew them all because I'd spent so much time with the company, and not being boring and just talking about drums and, you know, what my requirements are and why haven't I got more clinics and festival gigs. You know, just hanging out, you know, especially at trade shows, you know, like when there was the Frankfurt show, obviously, you know, you've got the NAMM show, there's drum shows you can go to that you know, if you know the people in the companies, you can speak to, say, oh, I keep up to date with your stuff. And you know, I to be honest now, I mean, I'm not really sure exactly what they're looking for, what the importance is on social media and followers, and I'm not really sure. But, you know, back in the day, you played well, you had a bit of exposure, you either worked with some decent bands, you know, that was kind of enough. You know, you were like a respected player on the scene, you were kind of invited into the fold. And I think that's changed a little bit now, A, because they're reluctant because they don't want to spend so much money on artist stuff, and you know, B, because I think so much emphasis has gone on to social media and followers and likes. I remember a friend of mine in Los Angeles, very well respected drummer, works very closely with one of the major companies, and I remember him saying to the new CEO of the company, he was telling me the story, you know, he said, you know, look, you've got to be aware of, you know, what people have done with their careers. If they've worked for 40, 50 major artists over the last 20 years, then that's an important contribution to the music industry, and they've got an important role in the company. And the guy replied, well, I'm not really bothered about that. All I'm interested in is how many followers they've got. So is this kind of new criteria of judgment of what people have to offer the companies, how many followers you've got, how much stuff you're putting out, how many views you get, all of that type of thing. So make sure you're on top of your social media, and you're trying to build up your followers and build up your fan base and all of those type of things, to put yourself in the picture with these companies. So like marketing's very important, having your own logo. Even down to having your own cards. If you meet someone from one of the drum companies, how are they going to remember you? Let's just say you've by chance you're sitting next to them, wherever for 10 minutes, and you've got the chance to sell yourself and say, look, I do this, I do that. If you haven't got a card to give them, they're never going to remember you. I remember doing one of the questions I always asked when I was doing lectures in universities and music schools was, how many people in the audience have got cards, calling cards, even if it's just your Instagram or your website or YouTube or whatever. No, like maybe 5% of people had cards. How are you going to share what you do with people if you've got no way of instantly giving them something that they can take away? Maybe they'll throw it in the bin, you never know. But at least you've put that there. You've given them the option of, remembering you, considering you, possibly looking at your stuff if you've, had an interesting conversation or whatever. So all of those things to put yourself in the picture. Again, you don't want to be hassling people all the time. You want to keep it light a little bit when you're trying to get to know people in companies, not all like heavy sort of stuff. In my experience, it doesn't matter what company it is. All the people that I've known, they've liked to have fun. They've liked to, be social. Like they say in Asia, all the business is really done in the bar afterwards. And which brings me to another small additional point with this, that once you are within a company, let's say you've now got your endorsement and you're working and you're wanting to push forward, it's very important to get to know the distributors, because it's not just the company that will do things for you. Knowing the distributors is a vital link in the chain. It's really important that you at least get to know them. Let's get to, or at least at the very least, know who they are. So you could send them stuff, or you could, see what's going on. One thing that also comes off of that is the politics of company versus company. So sometimes let's say you're with a certain cymbal company, and then you're with another drum set company, or drumstick company, say for example. Sometimes they might have some conflicts, shall we say, between one another. So the idea of you being able to put a clinic tour together using those two companies would become very hard. So finding out what the politics of all the companies are is also an important aspect of it, because otherwise you could be in a situation where you think you're doing great, you've got the endorsements, everything's fine, but also your hands are tied behind your back because you've got two companies that will never work together. So that's an important thing. In terms of gear, people just think, oh, I get free gear and that's all amazing. I don't really see, that's not something that I ever thought about that much. That was the least important thing. If you want gear, you can buy it. If you're in a successful band, you've got the money to buy it. If you're rich, you've got the money to buy it. And if you're not, you can work to buy it or teach more or whatever. So don't ever think of it as a gear thing, and don't ever think of it as, you're going to get more out of it than you put in. You've got to put a lot in. You've got to go to the trade shows. You've got to meet people. You've got to build up those relationships. All of that stuff is so important in developing what potential there will be for you to push forward with different aspects of your endorsement. And in the case that things don't work out, then you've got to work out, when to change companies. Now, one very important thing with drum companies, and when they're considering people for endorsements, if they're looking at people who have had endorsements before with other companies, they're going to look at how long they've been with those companies and why they've left. They might come up in personal conversation between you and the new company or whatever. So you've got to have a real sense of loyalty with the companies up to a point where it's not bearable. If they're not giving you any support, they're just completely blanking you and ignoring you, then you've got to think, well, there's no point in staying with that company. Okay, you've got the sort of kudos of being an endorser of bingo bongo percussion, or whatever. But then on the other side of the coin, you're like, well, it's in name only. It's meaningless. It's worthless. Find another company. Even go to a smaller company, someone you can work with personally. That personal experience, going back to what I was saying earlier, is really important. And obviously in a smaller company, specialist company, say for example you want to work with one of the smaller frame drum companies if you're a frame drummer, or one of the smaller cymbal companies as a drum set player, or one of the smaller drum set companies, there's a little bit more opportunity to have more direct personal relations, and that sometimes that can be an important thing. But then the flip side of that coin is that you might not always get any real proper support. So there are lots of things to consider in thinking about endorsements, whether you want them, whether you don't want them. For me, it was something that was very important to me in the latter part of my career, and in the first part of my career was not important at all. The reason it was important in the latter part of my career was that I was doing a lot more clinics, I was doing a lot more drum festivals. My gear was supplied. I had a big setup in Germany that would get shipped all over Europe from Gaver Music, who luckily were, when I moved to LP, were the distributor of LP, and they were with Remo before, so it was a very easy change. And it was a very useful involvement with the companies at that time, and was kind of a good direction for me for that period in time. But if I went back to the first part of my career, where I was doing mainly my solo projects, more sort of theatre gigs, arts centre gigs, collaborative touring, British Council was sending me around touring around the world doing different collaborations. Having an endorsement had no value to me then whatsoever. It was nice, it was on the paper, endorsed by Zildjian, and I was with Promark in the beginning, I think, and Meinl and all of that. But apart from a bit of free gear, which I could afford anyway, and being included in some brochures, other than that, it was there was nothing really to write home about. So if you aren't sure, think about what your needs are. Do you really need an endorsement? What are your objectives and your ambitions with an endorsement? Do you want to be a soloist and do clinics and drum festivals, or do you if you're a band player, you probably need it less. If you're touring with a big band, you need it even less. Obviously things like drumsticks and drum heads is a little bit different than cymbals and drums and actual percussion instruments and different things, because you get a drum set, you're not going to get a drum set every 2 weeks, but you might go through heads and drumsticks pretty quickly. So maybe you can angle towards endorsements that you think are going to be most practically useful for you going forward in terms of a financial thing. So that's it for endorsements. Don't forget, you can email me any questions, and all of the things that I say are just my personal thoughts and observations. They're neither right nor wrong, they're just what I think. So email me and tell me what you think. Right then, let's go on to some of the shorter questions now. This is from Samantha G, and she says, can I put towels on drums to practice? It's a funny one actually, because I remember when I first moved to London, right at the beginning of my career, I didn't really have anywhere to practice full drum set. It was like every week or so I could get onto an actual drum set, and so for the rest of the time I was practicing on practice pads and pillows and whatever. And for some people that's okay, but for me it gave me a real problem adjusting to actually what the drum set felt like, what the rebound was like, what the bounce was like, how the drums respond, how the cymbals respond. It became a very difficult scenario, because I would get so used to the feel of practicing not on the actual drum set, practice pads and pillows and stuff like that, as I say, and then to be suddenly obviously you're working on technique, you're developing independence, you're working on lots of elements of your playing, but for me at that point I felt it hindered my touch on the drum set for a start, and just what it felt like, what was coming back. So I mean, it's horses for courses really. You may well get on fine with that. If you can, I would say it's one step up from that is to practice on an electronic drum set. Really, I think that's going to be a little bit closer, because you can get the volume up to sort of correspond to what the volume's going to be when you're playing on a practice pad or whatever. So even then, I think if it's mixed, if you're getting to the drum set enough, the actual drum set, then working on like independence and coordination and stuff like that is fine if it's not responding in the same way that an actual drum set would do. So yeah, horses for courses. With percussion, sometimes it's actually not as bad, because I remember my first tabla teacher, Yusuf Ali Khan, he used to practice with towels or tea towels over the tabla, so he could practice late at night. And the thing about that is that you've still got the sound of the drum, you've still got the feel of the drum, physically, because with tabla you have to hold the drums in like the buyer, you have to kind of wedge against your leg, and so for non-drum set things, I think it might be more applicable, like congas, stuff like that, putting stuff on. Another thing that I did try at one point, which was, it kind of worked okay, would be to take the head off, put something inside. This is not to be confused with my bass drum idea that I was talking about in the no bass drum videos, but just put something like a thinnish tea towel or something like that, then put the head back on and tension it up, and sometimes you can be getting more of the feel, but obviously not the volume. So horses for courses really with that one. I think basically as long as you balance it with lots of time on the drum set, or enough time on the drum set so it doesn't feel completely alien, like if you practiced all week on if you're starting out, you practice all week on drum pad practice pads and pillows and stuff, and then you go to the band rehearsal and you're on actual drum set, then I think you might be a little bit difficult. But yeah, so as long as it's balanced between the practice setup and the actual drums. So the next question, okay, so this is an interesting one. This is from Jaspaal. I've watched some of your videos and it looks like you are triggering tracks from an iPhone, iPad or iTunes. How do you stop the next track auto playing? Because I never see you stop or pause the music player on the device. Interesting. Yeah, there are some gigs that have been filmed with a camera above. So sometimes at the end of the track, you see my setup, and on the percussion table there's an iPad, or and it's a little bit of a long story really, because in the beginning my intention really was to do a lot of live looping. So I kind of got really into the live looping thing, and I had effects I have my own mixer on stage, my own mics, all going into this thing. And once you start to have effects and the looper for a percussion instrument, if it's a line instrument like a, I don't know, bass guitar or a guitar, it's fine, because you've not got the same problems if you have with acoustic percussion. I mean, we're talking more about percussion here, but with percussion, even if you set all the levels and everything for the, you know, the incoming signal, it needs to balance to the outbound signal. So if you record, say for example, you record a tabla part, and then you loop it, and then you press play for the loop, so it loops after whatever, how many 2 bars or whatever, and it's twice the volume or half the volume, then you kind of got a problem. So when you've got lots of different percussion instruments, one on top of another, you have a real problem with balance in terms of you know, getting it, you know, for it to be convincing. What goes out, you know, in the end needs to be kind of balanced to what you've actually played in live. Otherwise, it kind of sounds a bit silly. Obviously, that's easy with a line instrument, but with percussion, it's not quite so easy. And then the next problem I had was getting effects on board. So to have different effects on different instruments that I was putting into the looper meant that the effects needed to be before the looper. And then that, you know, because of the different volume of different instruments and then different effects, and it just became like a headache. It was manageable if you had a really long sound check, but then you've only sound checked your looping station. And so then I went on to, you know, different things. I went on to triggering phrases and longer passages of music on SPDS-X, and that worked pretty well actually. There's quite a few videos on here of me triggering things with that. That was a really great system. That worked well. Then with traveling as a soloist, you know, you start to, especially for myself, I've got to take tabla, frame drums, you know, kanjira, and then certain mics that will work with the loop, with the hand percussion, and then you know, then you've got the SPDS-X and all of that. It starts to get quite a lot, besides other, you know, things that you might need to take and carry around. So then I went on to the idea of actually preparing longer things with specific arrangements and cues as tracks on you know, on an iPad or, you know, iTunes or whatever. Now the thing, if you've watched drummers use iTunes on stage live, very often they'll finish a track and then the next one will start. And so for me, that was never an option. So I had a number of solutions to that. The first solution I had was to record tracks of you know, 20-minute silence. So I knew that, so I'd make a playlist, and I'd have the first track that I was going to play to, and then I'd have the 20-minute silence, and then the second track, then the 20-minute silence, and so on and so forth. So you knew that even if you forgot to press stop, you're not going to suddenly have the next track blasting out when you're, you know, talking about split hand technique or something, or, you know, or playing an acoustic track or whatever it is you would do, you know, as the next track. So that was the probably one of the best solutions. And then there were a few apps that came out. There was an app called Big Button, which you could make a playlist and it wouldn't auto play the next track. I don't know why that's not a feature in a lot of these music playing apps, MP3 playing apps. Really, it's quite bizarre, really. So anyway, yeah, you'd have the feature where it doesn't play the next track, and that was pretty useful. And then with a lot of these apps, you kind of get them and they're great, and you kind of rely on them a little bit, and then they're discontinued, which is really annoying. So in the end, my app, my partner in my drum jam app, Jesse Sonosaurus, in America, he made me a special app, and I've got it here actually. Yeah, he made. I mean, it doesn't work anymore because I'm not using it. So, but yeah, you can kind of see it. Yeah, it's the third icon as my dodgy head. on there. So yeah, he made me an app with my head on it, which I'm not really sure satisfied me that much. It did actually. It was because it was a brilliant app. The actual functionality of it, just my head was a bit, iffy looking at my head in the middle of a gig. But anyway, it was a brilliant app. It didn't autoplay the next tune. You could set your playlists up. You could save them. So that's the good thing. But I think if you've not got that and you've not got an app that works, not autoplaying the next track, then I think just record. All you got to do is get a few in something like Twisted Wave or SoundForge or even Logic or GarageBand or something. Make a track, and then just silence it and save it as an MP3, and basically you've got 20 minutes of silence, and just call that silence as a good idea for a start, because it's a silent track. But then just put that in, intersperse that in the playlist in between tracks, and that is a good solution. So finally for today, from Ollie, sorry Ollie if I've mispronounced your name, OLE, unusual spelling. Now, Ollie has a broken dynha head. Dynha is the small tabla. Where can I buy a new one? And it's kind of nice to have this sort of little question in there, really, because these type of questions, because sometimes it's useful. You don't know where to look, or you don't know where to, find something. So there are a number of options. First of all, actually, really, honestly speaking, the best thing to do is buy a new drum, because I don't know if you've looked at my tabla tuning video, you'll see the complexity of the tabla head and the system. And actually replacing a head is a really complicated thing. Now, if you're in India, it's fine because you've got people that will do it easily. That's their skill, that's their craft. They do it easily, because one of the important things about tabla drums is that the heads are made on the drum. So they're very, very well fitted to the drum, because they literally dry in place on the drum, and then the black spot, which is made from flour and iron filings and rubbed in the middle, that's made while it's on the drum. So if you're putting a head on the drum, like you would a Remo pinstripe or something like that, then basically you've got a head that has been made on a drum, not your drum, but a drum, and then the black spot's been put on. But then, of course, it's been taken off, and so then the black spot is very temperamental. Little bits of it can come loose. It's flour and iron filings paste on the drum head. So you imagine that you're going to detension that and then tension it up really high. Then basically you're really running the risk of little bits coming loose. And when little bits come loose in the black spot, it kind of kills all the harmonic of the drum, and it buzzes, and it's like super, super irritating. It can even happen on new drums. But it's much more likely to happen if you put a new head on a drum that when the head's not made on the drum. So shops in the UK, it depends where you are. I think you're going to be looking at mail order wherever you are, unless you live close to one of these places. There's some great places in Southall. There's JAS musicals. There's Bina. In East London there's a shop called Guru Sounds. So there's a lot of options. They all do mail order. You could do mail order from India, if you wanted to research that. So my favourite tabla maker is Mukta Das in Kolkata. Makes amazing drums. In fact, he was the guy that made all of when Meinl made decent tablas. They did the pro ones, and they did other ones that were really not fantastic at all. But the pro ones were absolutely brilliant, made by Mukta Das, primarily because I introduced him to Meinl in the first place. And they're great drums. I don't know whether they make them anymore. I have no idea. I don't know if they get them supplied from him anymore. But if you can get the pro Meinl drums, if they're still in stock and if they're still in good nick, they've been in the warehouse for 3 years, then it's probably maybe not the best idea, but worth looking at that. Jazz musicals, for example, in the United Kingdom, don't put heads on drums. What they'll do is when they do, they can, but they choose to sell you a new drum, because it's so time consuming for them to put a new head on. So unless you've got an absolutely first class shell with neem wood and something like that you've got in Kolkata or in India somewhere, unless you've got an absolutely brilliant shell that you have to keep. It was just like a regular tabla, then I'd say just get a new drum. Really, it's not going to cost you that much more. It works out, I mean, it's ages since I've researched it, but it worked out about £5 more, something like that. You gave them your old drum, they just gave you a new drum, and it was, I don't know, for then I mean, it's years ago, God knows what it costs now, but it was like 40 quid, 50 quid, something like that. 50 pounds, that is British pounds, I might add. So that's the best bet with tabla. It's a very can be a very temperamental instrument in terms of the heads going quite quickly. Sometimes you buy a new set of tablas and the heads will go, but you get home and the head goes. It's quite amazing. So one additional note to that is that it's very important, especially if you're in an environment that gets hot and cold, and it's not if it's a regular temperature with a thermostat and AC and stuff, then maybe you're okay. But generally speaking, I would, after you've been practicing or playing or whatever, detune it a little bit, because it just takes a little bit of tension out of the head. You don't have to take it all off of straps and everything, just detune it a little bit so it's down a couple of semitones or something like that, and you're much better off longevity, saying keeping your drums going. Although that said, the Mukta Das ones last, for me, I mean, the thinnish heads, they're some people say they go quite quickly, but mine have always lasted a long time, years in fact, some of them, which is amazing. So thanks for watching. Don't forget, hit the like and subscribe buttons, because that's all very important, and share wherever you can share it, in the supermarket, in the pharmacy, the doctor's surgery. Just get out there and share it, and I'll see you next time.